This is a Rogue Media Network podcast. The Waco History Podcast is sponsored by Brotherwell Brewing on Historic Bridge Street in Waco.
Cross the Brazos and Waco, ride hard and I'll make it by dawn. Cross the Brazos and Waco, I'm safe when I reach San Antonio.
Welcome back to the Waco History Podcast. This is your host, Stephen Sloan. I've got John Kamanec with us again for part 3 of this case that he has spent so much time researching, and he's been generous with his time here with us as we've kind of walked through it. But this is part 3 of the case and execution of Roy Mitchell. And so, John, I want to pick up where we were last time. We kind of left off at the Bolton trial, is where we were in the trials.
Well, that was pretty much a little bit of nothing on that trial.
Mm-hmm.
They by the time they got to the 5th trial, they were some of the groupies weren't showing up, all the women. But it only lasted a day. And interesting thing, one of the people picked as a juror was Mr. Gildersleeve.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He was, and there was a few other celebrities picked out of the 60 people up to that point, but not on that trial. But one of them was Parnell McNamara's grandfather. He was a deputy sheriff.
Yeah.
And he became a farmer out in Bosqueville, and then while he was a farmer, they picked him.
Picked him as a jury member.
And then there were several people that were went on to more important things later. There was one guy who became a police chief.
Oh, wow.
So-
oh, wow. That's
So
amazing.
quite a few police people got picked on the jury here and there, which might not really help Roy out.
Yeah, no, it didn't help Roy's case any. Yeah.
But anyway, and they picked a jury pretty quick in the Bolton case. But, you'd think that they were going to have Mrs. Hayes testify,
Yeah.
and maybe her father testify, and the kids that help her out, rescued her.
Yeah.
None of that happened.
Huh.
I mean, it was real quick and easy. Except Roy kind of put a wrench in it. He decided to try a different tact on this one. And he come out and said how he wasn't guilty, and that the reason he was arrested that day was he'd been shooting craps, and he got caught, and they took several people to jail. And he said that he claimed there was a young man there that had a gold knife with Harold Bolton's initials on it. Well, when Harold Bolton's body was found, there was a knife still on it. He'd taken quite a bit of money from him. I think he got $20-something from him. He was a rich kid. And anyway, got a bunch of money from him, but he left the knife behind. Now he's trying to say that some kid at a crap game had the knife, and that he could testify and give his name if he wasn't a Judas or snitch. And instead he said, I won't do that. So
Yeah, different strategy.
and apparently he was trying to show that there was somebody else that might have done it. Now, how the knife got from Harold Bolton's pocket when Roy seen it, when in his confession he says he left the knife, and then later on it shows up in another guy's pocket, and then it apparently goes back to the man's pocket.
Somehow it got back to Bolton.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the kid supposedly got released. Apparently they didn't have much to hold him on for anything, but they kept Roy because of his general description, basically. And that's when he was going to be taken over and shown to Mrs. Hayes. So, and we all know how that turned out.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Okay, so the Bolton trial is a non-event.
yeah, they had a few people testify. They had the jeweler that engraved the watch for Bolton testified as to that was his watch. And then they had Mrs. Mitchell testify, and another woman that lived at the house with them. And they just basically said that he was home at 9 o'clock.
Which is kind of the stock response that we'd hear all along.
Yeah, and then it took 5 minutes for the jury to come out. And like I said, if anybody's keeping score, it was 27 minutes altogether for 5 trials.
Wow. Wow.
Well, it's hard to beat a confession.
Mm-hmm.
I've read one of his confession in 2 of his cases, and I don't see why he even showed up. Mm-hmm. He should have just pled guilty and hope.
Because the level of detail that's in the confession, yeah.
And it sounds just like him. It can't.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a ranger there that he made a big compliment to all the police officers and everybody. He said how they were real professional and did his best, and well, made everybody happy with that. That was Sergeant Whitley. Hmm. Then the next trial was going to be, next thing that happened was that Roy come up, and the day of the trial was March 30th. And on the 31st, he got with this newspaper reporter and told him that he had something he wanted published. So he writes out this testimonial, I guess you want to call it, saying that all these people are going to find out the strangest things are going to happen in Waco the next, well, he didn't say the next day. He just said the strangest thing is going to happen. Everybody's going to see that his prayers can be answered and all this kind of stuff. So March 31st, he goes and gets that. And I guess he didn't figure on him publishing it right away, because it got published the day before April Fool's Day. So I don't know if Roy was just pulling their legs or if he was, well, I'm sure he's just pulling their legs.
Yeah.
Or he just missed the date. He didn't realize the newspaper could be published that quick. So next thing he had to deal with was would be the appeals. Oh, well, actually not the appeals. The next thing was the grand jury come out then and indicted him on the Concord murders.
Okay.
And when they 3 indictments for Mr. Barker, Mrs. Barker, and Homer Turk. And they were just going to try him first on the Mrs. Barker part of it. Mm-hmm. But the people that were of the grand jury, they decided that they were going to put a petition out for Benny Young and Cooper Johnson, the ones that were convicted of the murders of the Barkers and Turks. And they put a petition out, and that started a firestorm then. The main person that got concerned with it was District Attorney Farmer. Somebody stated that he had signed the petition, and he got all upset with that. When the trial came, he got on the stand and got sworn in and swore that he never signed the petition. Mm. He had to make sure that everybody knew that, because he didn't want to have trouble getting elected later.
Yeah.
Homer Turk's father went to the governor and talked to him about it. And the governor said, well, if you can give me any information to just send it to me directly, I'll act on it. After that, they pretty much started the Concord trial. It was set for April the 19th. They picked a jury fairly quick. Mr. Farmer did his regular thing. He read the confession. Mm-hmm. When the case was over with, when they started the Concord, just before they started it, they were talking about the appeals, and he asked for an appeal, and the judge wanted to know why, and he says, "Well, I don't think I was tried right." Now here he is; he's done given all these confessions, and sounded real good confessions too. I believed him. Of course, you couldn't believe everything he said.
Yeah, you talked about that.
I found out later he knew how to work the system, and the judge told him, "You have the right to appeal, but I don't delight in human misery, but you are one man that I will not regret sentencing to be hanged." Then later on, when the appeals came in and he got 6 death penalties, he told him that I wish I could hang you 6 times. Then everybody'd have a little bit of it.
Yeah, wow.
But anyway, the trial started, and this is one trial that I don't know for a fact that Roy was guilty of.
Yeah.
I can't put my finger on why. Well, the thing was, Roy had gone to knew the area, and when Cooper Johnson was arrested and had his trial, they asked him why he knew so much about what went on, how he was able to say different things. And he said, "Well, we were listening to all the white folks talk. That's how we heard what was going on." So when he had to do his little confession, which his confession wasn't that good, he said that Benny Young killed Mr. Barker, and Benny Young said that Cooper Johnson shot him in the back of the head and killed him. He got shot under the left eye in the face and left powder marks. So their confessions weren't that good. They didn't listen real close to all the white folks, apparently. But anyway, Sheehy had done a lot of investigating on it. He wasn't the lawyer on the case, but they had a guy named Dewhith, Young McDaniel, and William McConnell, and William McLaughlin, and they were all fairly good lawyers, apparently. They went on to better things. They picked a jury, and nobody really... Oh, there is one name that stands out, the foreman. His name was Harry Lynch. And everybody that hears that say, "Oh, that's a great name for the last trial."
Yeah, jury foreman on the last trial.
Yeah. See, it's kind of ironic. Well, anyway, they read the indictment. He pled not guilty. Farmer read the confession like he always did. I wish I could have got that confession. Now that one I don't have, and let's see, the Driscoll one I got, and the Hope Dennekamp one I got, but I don't know why they were kind of holding this one back. One thing though, Farmer didn't try the case of Cooper and Benny Young, but Siegel was the one that got the confession. So I could see that if there was some problem arresting a guy later on, and then because later on, Farmer actually comes up on his closing argument, says, "I don't know who helped him. I don't know if he had help. I'm just, and don't care if Cooper and them were innocent or guilty. I just know that he's guilty." And he wasn't about to backpedal any on Cooper Johnson and them. everybody was hoping that Roy would, be able to get them cut loose.
Yeah.
Cooper Johnson ended up dying in the poor farm just about a week before Roy did. And Benny Young ended up going to prison for 11 years. And then I tracked him down to California. And he'd been living there. He got paroled in 34. And it shows that he was living, they asked you the question, where were you in 1935? And he was in Fresno, California then. And then he moved in with some white guy with 4 other black guys, and he was listed as a partner in that case. And I don't know what happened to his marriage, that he supposedly was married beforehand, but he ended up, they just had the number 7 written down there, and it didn't show what 7 meant for if he was divorced or what. I found a Japanese guy, a couple people down, that had 7 on his marriage thing too. So I'd like to, if anybody knows, just give me a call.
Let John know, yeah.
And the Homer Turk's father testified next in this case. He told how they found the bodies and everything. And then Ranger Burton got to testify. And in his case, he never really did, said that Cooper Johnson and Benny Young probably weren't guilty. That was in his opinion, but he never said it at the trial. And then and Burton had found the double bit axe that was bloody. And Roy said in his confession that he had used the double bit axe to kill the Turk boy, but he didn't. Roy also said that because the story to John Sheehy was that the reason they didn't rob the store, well, they went out there and the man, Mr. Barker, came out. He was going to put his horse up or something like that, and he must have heard something or whatever, because his hand was in his pocket, clasped around an unopened knife, and then he was shot below the left eye, and bullet went through his head, hit the wall of the store, and then the wife and the Homer Turk came outside, and Homer Turk got killed. Well, he got hit. He died a day later, and then he ended up going back in the house. And then the woman was killed in the house. And anyway, they say that the reason he didn't rob the store was because there was a dog in there. And Sheehy had investigated. He found one detective, a Deputy Smith Dozer, that verified that there was a dog inside the store. And then Ranger Burton also had seen a dog inside the store. That when they opened the door, it come running out. It'd been sitting on a sack of potatoes in there. So he had a good dog. He protected the store at night, but didn't protect him any. Now he did get the sequence wrong. He said that the woman and boy were killed first, and then the man was taken outside and shot. But that was 50 years later. I've found many a time when people wait 50 years to do the memoirs, it gets it off a little bit out of joint.
Yeah.
Then Burton said that there was Mr. Barker was killed with .38 caliber, and the trial before he said a .41 caliber. Now that finally got the lawyers up complaining
because of that discrepancy.
Yeah. And the thing was, Benny Young and them surrendered a 45 caliber rusted gun that couldn't shoot as a murder weapon that they used in the trial against them. So, and IMAC Wood, he was one of the deputies, and he apparently was used as a tracker. If you see a picture of him, you say he looks like a school teacher. He's kind of small. Wears glasses, but apparently he was good at tracking because he tracked them. He ran some tracks from the back of the store area through the field in the back to the railroad track, which was quite a ways away. And then he quit at the store. Now, Roy said that that's the way he escaped, and then he continued on to Lakeview and got the interurban there and came on home, which I complain quite a bit about Ella Farmer's version of everything.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah.
Oh, it just bothers me because in her case, she had said first that in her True Detective magazine, the first part, she puts out Roy Mitchell as his name as a suspect right off the bat, saying that that somebody had heard Mr. Cowan's car, the man he chauffeured for, and it had a distinctive sound. And this distinctive sound, just everybody knew it. And they had heard it that night. Well, and when he was investigated and questioned and everything, they got Mr. Cowan out there. And what they did, they said that Roy had gone and dropped the car off at Mr. Cowan's house with Mr. Cowan, gave him the key, and just didn't lock the lock, just clasped it on there. Well, here in the trials, they have no mention of a car or nothing.
Oh, really? Okay.
So
where did she get that?
Where did she get that?
Yeah.
Now, there is a person that says that earlier at 9 o'clock they were driving into Waco, and there was a car ahead of them come out of the store about 9 o'clock real fast and drive off. But the shot wasn't heard till 10 o'clock. So she might have been she might have been told that and used it and then came up with this story about a distinctive sound. But the problem also was, how did he get the car out of the garage? Now, this was at 12th and Franklin. There was garages on the bottom floor on one side and then there was apartments across the top. All those apartments across the top had people living in them. Yeah, he could have opened the door, rolled the car out. He might even had his helper with him at the time, or he could have gone and got him. Now he's got to push the car down the road a little because this car's got a distinctive sound. And this is February, weather's cold, sound travels in the cold better. You can have push this thing a couple blocks down the Franklin Avenue or Austin or Washington, something like that, till you can get in it and drive it off.
Yeah.
And then if somebody else happens to know that distinctive sound, they say, hey, I heard you leaving the other night. And same thing of getting it back. Now you got to get it back. You got to stop. You got to push it down the street. A couple of black guys pushing a car down the street in the middle of the night. And then you got to get it into the garage, hope that nobody's awake upstairs, hope nobody's coming home or leaving at that point. Now, she got fed either she was doing it just to make it sound good for the
magazine readers.
But the problem with that is lots of people have used her account
as the story of what happened
without going into it and investigating it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On the Concord trial, there's a lot of things that don't get told. She would say. In fact, she actually says in the last thing of her story that Roy was never tried for the murders of the Barkers, and said, well,
That's not true.
No, it's not true.
Yeah.
The longest trial he had was that.
Yeah.
It wasn't a real long trial.
Yeah.
They started out at 9 o'clock. At 4 or 3 o'clock or so, they ended up going to the jury, and then the jury, about 5 something, they went ahead and went to deliberate. Quit for the evening. Came back 9 o'clock the next day, and then at 11 they went ahead and found him guilty. So they took their time. They said that there was one guy that was holding out for a life sentence, and that's what kept them slow.
I see.
But then there was Roy said that he had thrown away Mr. Barker's snap purse in a field, and he had gone and took that information and tracked down a bunch of school kids. Well, he found one man that lived next door that had found a purse that was all wet and everything. And him and his guy that was driving his cattle for him found it, and they just tossed it away because there was nothing in it and it was trash. And then school kids, somebody else had found a handkerchief that had some blood on it, possible blood on it. And then there was some, they asked the question, and Roy knew, and the watch, wanted to know what kind of watch he had. And Roy knew it was an Ingersoll watch. So, but then again, Roy also went to both trials of Benny Young and Cooper Johnson. Mm-hmm. He went to all of Benny Young's, most of Cooper Johnson's, and he went to the final attorneys speak at the end.
Mm-hmm. Closing arguments. Yeah.
He went to that on both of them.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew all whatever facts were in there. And he could have just been doing it to help out somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Might be why he never gave the man's name who was his helper later on.
Mm-hmm. But
then again, he didn't want to be a Judas. He didn't want to give up that young guy with the knife, even though he might not have existed.
So so this is the last trial. It ends in April, right? We're in April.
20th or so.
Okay.
And trying to think if Roy talked in the trial. He said it was a responsible thing for him to do.
Was to testify?
Well, to testify for Benny Young and Cooper Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
But he said that he used the double bit axe on Homer Turk. And the Professor Gooch from Baylor, he didn't testify, but he sent a letter saying that he found blood on the double bit axe, but he didn't find it on the single bit that had come from the Cooper Johnson and the employers, because they tried to say that one was used on one person, one was on the other. And that was part of the Cooper Johnson's confession, I think, too.
Mm.
So much for his confession being worth anything. Now, Roy said that he went out there after the day after the murders, too, and visited the site. So there he is. He's going to trials, 2 trials, well, actually 3. He went to Ivory Clay's trial as well. He went to 3 different trials that he was responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes to a murder scene the day after. I don't know if he was just going to see what was being said or did or what.
Mm-hmm.
But he gives 2 names for this one guy, and the guy, they never did find him. It was Bill Miller or Bill Smith, something like that. There was somebody named Bill that he went with, a white guy. So anyway, they found him guilty pretty quick on that. The little girl didn't testify either. Now I could see why they wouldn't have her testify. She would have been 5 years old at the time.
Yeah.
And if she couldn't verify it was Roy, then that wasn't good for the one case. But so they went let Burton and the girl's uncle tell what she had told him. So they used hearsay on that again. It worked on the earlier trial against the other people, so why not use it again?
Yeah.
And like I said, by 5 o'clock or so, they rested and took the day off. And now, like I said, Point and Farmer definitely made sure that everybody knew that he didn't sign the petition. And again, don't be messing with white women. Don't be killing people. It says he said he did not know or care if they were guilty. He was only sure that Roy had swung the axe that killed Mrs. Barker and Homer Took. And he did not know if he had help or did it alone, but called for a death sentence either way. One unusual thing that happened, though, Roy come up and said, normally he would say, I didn't kill those people. Well, in this case, he come out and said, I didn't kill Mrs. Barker. So that leaves to say that the other guy did. Now, he confessed to killing Turk. I don't know who confessed to shoot Mr. Barker. But so I guess he wanted it on the record that he did not kill her, but he killed a little boy. But
yeah, wow.
And they only got $2 or $3 for their problems too.
Yeah.
Well, I think they got a few more dollars from Mr. Barker, but they didn't say how many. But like I said, I had trouble with Mrs. Farmer quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'd gone and it's not so bad, but the thing is, when a lot of the newspaper accounts and stuff like that, you can just read them from other places and magazine accounts and realize that the guy just phoned it in.
Sure.
It's just garbage. A lot of them would come out and say, yeah, he killed all these people at Lover's Leap and on Cameron Park. He was a killer of Cameron Park. He shot one and killed one in Cameron Park. There are others he did on 12th Street, or tried to do on 12th Street, did out around Concord and other little locations around town. He switched it around. But when it come to, and then just because Mrs. Farmer should have known, should have been given the right information, but she kind of dressed it up to herself. There was one incident when Roy confessed. They were saying that she said how the lightning was flashing and the water was pouring and it looked like a Dr. Frankenstein movie.
Very dramatic.
Real dramatic. He went in there and he started confessing, and all this was going on. And I went ahead and looked up and seen what the weather report was that day, and it mentioned there was a general rain, about I forget a quarter inch or something like that of rain happened. They didn't mention any thunderstorms or anything like that. But the next thing they did was do some appeals.
Yeah, so there's a period of appeals after the last trial.
Right.
Yeah.
And Roy writes a couple letters, and in it he pretty well lies. He says that he wrote 3 letters altogether. One was real nice, so I think somebody might have He might have had somebody else write it for him, but the other two are definitely in his handwriting and all. But it's
so what's the essence of his appeal? What grounds is he saying?
Oh,
yeah.
he wasn't allowed to see his wife. He couldn't get a lawyer. He was given lawyers were given to him, but they never showed up, and he'd be given a different lawyer when he went to trial who he'd never seen before. Now there was one case where one lawyer was picked to be his lawyer. He had two others with him, and that lawyer had a trial he had to go to in Belton, so that he might have used that as an excuse, but he still had the other two lawyers, and he had, I think he had a third lawyer assigned to him. So, and then, he was found guilty on no evidence at all. Well, he didn't mention all the stuff they found in his house. Didn't mention all the confessions.
So he didn't argue. I mean, you mentioned earlier that someone later is going to say some of the evidence was planted. He doesn't make that argument.
He never makes that argument. He just says that there was no evidence.
Yeah.
So anyway, he goes and the attorney general district attorney general got the appeals. What they did, they sent the appeals off as soon as possible, and Farmer was really pushing to get them in. He was wanting them back by May something, and they didn't come back till latter part of June. And then he went down there to make sure they were signed and everything, and they put them in the mail, and he rushed back to Waco to see if they as soon as they got him, he was going to. It was his death warrant, so he wanted to get it put in there and put the final nails in his coffin. But anyway, in the appeals, the assistant district attorney for attorney general, when he got a hold of him, he said if there was any case that merited the death penalty, it was this case. And then the Supreme Court people got a hold of, the district clerk of the Supreme Court got a hold of it, and they went ahead and read the letters and gave them due diligence, but they said didn't add nothing. He didn't show no proof. He didn't send an attorney. He said he was going to send an attorney that his wife was trying to get some, but he couldn't talk to his wife because they wouldn't let him. And he wrote the governor to have him allow them to let his wife talk to him. And I don't know what the governor did or not. But then when they actually they do the ruling, they publish it on June 28th, and it says the judge starts out, he says, the facts revealed by the record are unfit to appear on the printed pages of the record of this court. There's always a but. He goes on, however, to state, he shot and killed a man whom he had never seen before the night of killing, ravished and shot and killed a woman, companion of said man, robbed the dead body of the man, tied it on behind a car and dragged it over the ground, beat the bodies of his victims over the head, which he only did one that way. So they were incorrect on that, with a gun barrel, and deliberately took what seemed to him all necessary steps to remove evidence of his crime. And then, so they gave him due, but then they didn't find it credible. So anyway, the last, on June 29th, it was mailed, and they were trying to get it before close of business on Saturday, June 30th, which they did. They got it by 1:00, which is pretty good for mail. Yeah. It takes 7 days nowadays?
Yeah.
And that's back when they used to deliver twice a day and everything. So anyway, then they went and got Roy, and Stiegel, Hobbs, Jackson, and Wood were all they brought him from the jail, handcuffed and with a lead chain, with Stiegel holding on to the chain, and brought him before the judge at 5 o'clock. And then what they did, they got a whole bunch of dignitaries to show up, a bunch of other judges and everything, because this was the first time that this many people had ever, a person had ever been found guilty of that many capital offenses and sentenced to that many death sentences.
Mm.
I don't know if anything's like it since then, but nowadays, you just, guy kills 12 people, they go and they charge him in one of the murders, and then if that doesn't work, they charge him in another one.
Yeah.
Instead of going all 12 at once.
And instead of doing 6 death penalties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No point in doing that.
Yeah. So they do this kind of ceremony at the courthouse.
Yeah, what they do, they read the mandate to them, which says you've been found guilty, and you got some. And then they had to go do all this figuring, 30 days till. At first, they were worried. They were thinking it was going to end up in August sometime, because if it didn't get there on Saturday on time, it'd be Monday. And then 30 days would take you into August, and they got to be precise and all. They ended up figuring that it was going to 30 days would end up on a Sunday. So they said, well, we can't hang them on a Sunday. Okay. So they gave them a Monday date, July 30th at 11 o'clock. Now, apparently somebody said that he was maybe getting a little grumpy, and he said, might as well get it over with, that kind of thing, which was possible to do if you wanted to. You could waive your rights. There was a man in 1902, Jim Buchanan, killed a person or somebody, and Sheriff Spradley in Nacogdoches caught him, got him to trial. They had the trial. They had some militiamen there, and I seen a picture of these guys. They look like little boys in Boy Scout uniforms, and they had some leftover uniforms from the Spanish-American War. And anyway, there was about a dozen of them at the most. Well, there was many more times that people outside, and they had cut the telephone wires. All the telegraph wires. They surrounded the courthouse and all. They even took the train out of the depot and put it down the track so it couldn't be used. And so the judge asked the defendant in the case, who had been found guilty, they said, you can either give us the guy and we'll hang him, or you can hang him, or we can burn down the house, the place. And they talked to the defendant, and he went ahead and waived his rights. So 3 hours after he was taken out and hung, 3 hours after being found guilty, because at least, and it was done. It was a legal hanging then.
Well, I know that. I know there was a big concern with this case about mob violence, about a mob breaking in and getting Mitchell. And so how much of that did you find in your research?
No, they went out of their way not to have that happen.
Yeah.
They had, at the trial, at the hanging itself, they had, 30-40 policemen that they brought extra, plus all the regular ones. And don't know if they had any rangers at the hanging, but they did. All the trials except the Concord trial, they had a ranger. And by then, everybody said, well, 6 times, 5 times, he's going to hang. There's no problem there. Now, later on, when he was executed and his body was taken to the Westland Cemetery, they sent 5 policemen along, sheriffs and all along with, make sure that nobody took the body because they were afraid that they might do Jesse Washington or Jesse Thomas on them.
Yeah.
But there wasn't going to be anybody, not with Stiegel in charge.
And at the gallows, I know they set up temporary gallows. You may be getting to this in your talk here about how they kind of staged the execution.
Yeah. What they did, they investigated the clock tower, found it was decrepit.
Yeah.
Along with the rest of the building.
Yeah.
People were kicking their way out of the windows and doors and concrete floors and everything else. I found there was one with a death watch, even watching Roy Mitchell. There was 4 people escaped from the jail. But next thing that went on before they got prepared to do the execution and everything was that back in 1915, when Roy was arrested for the Enoch problems, there was a family that was attacked down in Temple, the Grimes family. And what happened was this guy, they were laying there in bed. The mother had given birth to a set of twins 7 months earlier, and she had them in one bedroom, and she was nursing them and taking care of them at night. So she kept the babies with her, and then the father had the 7-year-old son with him in the other bedroom, and then I think they had 3 other daughters that were between like 2 and 6 years of age. They were sleeping in another bedroom. Well, a guy named Will Stanley shows up. He come walking down from Fort Worth, and they say that he had a pair of shoes that had no soles in them. He goes and snatches a hammer out of a railroad place, a track hammer they called it. Goes in there, hits the woman and the man in some order. I don't know who got it first, but anyway, knocks them and then hits 3 of the 2 small children, the twins, hits them with a hammer, and hits the 7-year-old boy with a hammer. The other 3 kids in the other room aren't molested in any way. Well, the 3 children die. The parents wake up the next morning all groggy, don't know what's going on. And they send the other little kids go get help. The police start looking for whoever, the sheriff and everybody starts looking for somebody. So they do a big roundup. Roy Mitchell was arrested on July 11th out between Riesel and Mart by Hobbs and Stiegel. He apparently made bail because he was down in Temple on July 29th when this all happened. And they picked him up and questioned him. Now, they probably questioned a whole bunch of people because the guy that they finally caught was walking down the road and he runs into these 2 black guys. This was a black guy that did the killing, Will Stanley. And he walks down the road and he finds these 2 other guys and they say, hey, things are real hot. There's this murder of this family and they got all this stuff going on. Everybody's getting questioned and this and that. And he tries to sell them a pair of pants that he's got on. He's got the pants over another pair of pants that he's wearing, and they got a laundry mark of the Mr. Grimes name in it. And he tried to sell them for that so he could get a pair of shoes. Well, they didn't want to go with the deal, and then they separate. He goes on down to Rogers where he's arrested with the pants on still. And the sheriff comes and gets them. He tells them that these other 2 people were involved. He had 4 different stories altogether. Number one, that the other 2 people were involved somehow. Oh, that they all killed. One was that they were all paid to kill Mr. Grimes by a white guy. Another one was that they had, that they had done the killing. The other 2 guys had done the killing and was trying to sell him this stuff. And then they, said that the other 2 had sold him the pants. First off, he said he bought the pants in Fort Worth. That's a good deal. That is really a coincidence that you're going to be walking just by the guy's house that must have. I wonder what Mr. Grimes did without pants when he come back from Fort Worth, and then when this guy bought them up there. So, yeah, he got the pants in Fort Worth, and then the second one was that the other 2 people sold him the pants, and then he said the other 2 arrested with him had been involved with killing, but he just held the horses. Well, if he's got horses, why is he walking so?
Yeah.
I mean, how's all these 3 people walking down the road get horses? Well, anyway, the sheriff come and got him and took the other 2 with him and was trying to get him to Belton. Well, the mob kept heading them off everywhere they went. They ended up getting into Temple, and they got into this 3-story building and barricaded themselves in that, the sheriff and several other people, and that left the mob outside. The mob, they eventually sent some committees in to talk, to try and see who was guilty, and they went ahead and kind of held impromptu trial, and the 2 men got off. They were able to prove that they had nothing to do with it well enough, and the sheriff quickly got them out the back door and told them get. And then they took Will Stanley out. He goes outside, and first thing he does is start talking, saying, yeah, this white guy paid me to do it, and somebody just walks up and shoots him, kills him right on the spot. Now what you going to do? You got a dead guy you wanted to hang. Well, let's burn him. So they went ahead and they burned him. And when they did, there was they had some postcards of the event, and I've seen the picture. You can go to and look it up on the internet and see where a whole bunch of lynchings were done and whatever. And well, in his case, he's sitting there like this in a bodybuilding pose with his arms out, all burned up, and they've wrapped a white cloth or something around his waist and hung him from a guy wire. You know, a lot of people get him confused with Jesse Washington, but
different case.
You can. There's definitely, when you see this guy, you say, "Man, that's a mess," and it's got no trees around it. You know, it's not the downtown atmosphere and all. But anyway, they were selling postcards for 10 cents a piece. Post office put a stop to that real quick. They wouldn't allow them to be mailed or delivered if they were mailed. But apparently 1 or 2 got out there. But anyway, after they took care of the body and all, some kids were playing in the ashes trying to find souvenirs or whatever. Found a gold ring in there that they verified belonged to the cousin of the Grimeses. The girl had visited a week or 2 before and left the ring behind, and he apparently got that and stuck it in his clothes somewhere. And when he got burned up, it came out.
Wow.
So clothes, name in it, and then they went and they investigated him a little bit as far as what his life had been like before that. And he'd come from Abilene, I think, just before that, where he was accused of robbing fellow prisoners and fighting with them. Then he had done he'd murdered, a man had got lynched because of him over a murder. Another one was serving time I think the man, one got lynched and for a murder, and one got in jail, either for rape or murder, one or the other. So and that was just recent. That was just before he come to. So they talked to the guy whose name he gave as the one that supposedly told him to kill the Grimeses, and he said, "I don't know nothing about nothing."
Yeah. Yeah.
So what that was all about was Stiegel had been told that, you have all these unsolved murders in the counties all around here, and they went to Roy and tried to get him to
confess
to something. I mean, if you're going to confess to, why not do a Henry Lee Lucas?
Yeah, sure. Let's clear the books.
Yeah. Everybody's, oh, that sounds good. Sure, he did it. He wasn't born yet, but he did it. So anyway, he didn't confess to the 3 unsolved murders that he never confessed to. He didn't confess to the Grimes, that's for sure. He didn't need to.
Yeah.
They definitely had the right person there. So what he did do was he ends up giving up where the gun is, Driscoll's gun is at. There's a guy named Wesley Erath who's living a mile north of Elmont, and he had sold him the gun for $8. And this was after the Bolton shooting, because he fired off all the rounds already. I guess he didn't want to take a chance of buying more bullets or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't know how. I don't know. But he sold it to Mr. Erath. And Erath had worked with Roy for a couple years, so they knew each other. But do you really want to buy a gun from a man that, he should have gave that up fast? I would have. Said, I don't know where this gun come from, but you might, please, officer, will you check it for me? But that, he had said that gun had been sold to a Mexican on the square.
Erath had sold it again?
No.
Okay.
No, Roy had said in his confessions, which were proved 100% accurate by the police, that he had sold it to a Mexican.
I see.
So Roy was holding back stuff.
Did they get the gun from Erath? Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Mr. Erath, we're the officers. You're not going to say no unless you don't have it for some reason.
Yeah.
Hopefully, and then they're going to search the place. They're probably going to hold you as a material witness for a week or so.
Yeah.
As well.
So they continue to find some more evidence of his guilt. Yeah.
And just before he was hung, he gave up Driscoll's watch as well. It was at Stamler's in Detroit also. Well, now I wonder what the connection was with Stramler and Roy. I mean, I know they know each other and all, but was he just a fence or was he a accomplice? I can see why he'd want to move off to Detroit. I don't know when he went to Detroit, at what time. It was definitely after the Driscoll killing, but
you don't know exactly when.
Don't know when, and he was up there by the time the Skipworth killing happened in November. So sometime during the summer he left.
I see.
So Roy knew how to work the system. Then they decided to get ready to hang him. They were hoping he'd write a confession out as far as who his helper was, but he never did do that. But like I said, they checked the tower out, found out it couldn't have been used. It was last used in 1916, and that guy had that was John Washington, and he ended up strangling because it wasn't enough of a drop. And Roy was supposed to be taller than him, so they were going to have a bigger drop. And the floor was decrepit. And then, when they hung Nathan Lee in the courthouse in Brazoria, they had, I want to say they said 400 people in the clock tower, witnesses. Because, you can't have a public hanging, but you can have a legal private hanging and invite as many people as you want. They just have to all be on the jail property, inside the jail property.
Yeah.
So I could see if they tried to in this case, they put out invitations to all the victims. And just because of the number of victims and all, they said we're just going to have one or two from each group, each family. And the only family that didn't attend was the Barker family. I guess he was mad because he lost the money went to the girl instead of him. But so they took the trap mechanism off the jail tower, and what they were going to do, a week before the execution, they decided to go ahead and build the scaffold because it wanted to make sure that it was done right. And there was a metal door coming out the second floor of the courthouse. You can see it. I mean, not the courthouse, the jail. You can see it on a lot of the pictures. And what they did, they just built a platform up to that, so they didn't have the outside 13 steps. And just took a day to do it. Cost $21.80. And they, which was like $300 or $400 in today's prices. But they used 2x12s, bridge timbers, and then when it was all over, they took it apart, and it did it in one day too.
Wow!
So that's pretty good pay for one day's work back then.
So where was it on the? Have you been to kind of look to get a sense of where it is?
I would say it was pretty much right underneath the bridge.
Okay,
it goes from the courthouse over there.
Yeah,
and it was 16. What was it? I think it was 16-foot squares what they built it, and there was at least that much room between. There might have been just a little bit more room than that between the building itself and the alleyway. So there was a fence along the alleyway apparently. So that there was it might not have gone all the way to the alley, but close enough.
Okay.
And so they also went rope shopping. They had offers from Dallas was offering some rope that had already been used in maybe a dozen different hangings altogether. Yeah, but they decided they bought 25 foot of silk manila rope from from McClendon Hardware Company.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the story with the tornado,
Mm-hmm.
they always talk about the Jesse Washington being dragged, being taken from the court of the alleyway out, and that they'd gotten the rope supposedly from Dennis Building, and that's why the Dennis Building was destroyed. And well, I don't even know that they used a rope. I think it was just a chain. But either way, he wasn't dragged that way. So, and the same thing with Roy. We know where the rope come from. It come from a hardware store, not a furniture store.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the what were the events leading up to kind of the day of the execution? Yeah.
Well, things were kind of quiet for a while. They had a death watch on them.
Yeah.
And so they kept somebody in the not the cell, but and back in April, they also made what was called the Roy Mitchell cell. It was a cell within a cell on the second floor and had double doors and to make sure that he didn't get out since everybody else was getting out. But anyway, they were making sure that he didn't get out. And then they were also, but then just before the execution, they moved him downstairs. What it was, if you look at the story in where Clyde Barrow escaped, they show a picture of the desk where the jailer sat, and they show the stairway going up, and that was the interior. And then somewhere probably just off to the right of the stairway was where they kept Roy Mitchell right there, because from where the scaffold was, it was 15 feet over to the window where he was, which was 15 feet closer to 6th Street. So after they did fortunately they only spent a day, like I said, hammering and sawing, because it usually gets on people's nerves. They say it got on Nathan Lee's nerves down there when they were preparing the chamber. So they went and they also went clothes shopping for him, but he didn't wear the clothes, and he went barefoot. You got to be comfortable on a day like that. It's July. It's night. It's getting up on 11 o'clock. Sun's out. Of course, now they might have a little shade, but you had 4,000 to 10,000 people standing there too, talking and jabbering, so it sucking the air out of the area. But you hear all kinds of different stories of how many people were there.
Yeah, that is a wide range of estimates. I've seen that estimate before. Yeah. And
the thing is, well, I've seen pictures of it, but the one picture I saw of it by McCall was probably taken by the YMCA building after the execution, and by then some people had cleared out. Apparently, it wasn't person to person all through there, but they had people up on top of the auditorium building at 6th and Columbus, YMCA building at Washington and 6th Street, and people were all in the courthouse, of course, and then some people were back behind it in there's a building, used to be Goodall Garage, but right there behind the courthouse on 5th Street. But they ended up, they had, of course, the mandatory sandbag drops, and that went on until the day before the hanging. I know they could get a little nerve wracking too.
I would imagine, yeah.
Because see, now Roy, he was a trustee when John Washington was hanged, and he said, I hope nothing like that ever happens to any family member of mine.
Mm.
And then later on, when they were talking about upcoming execution, he said, yeah, back when that happened, I didn't know I'd be the next one.
Mm.
So that kind of tells you that hanging doesn't really deter crime.
Mm-hmm.
Capital punishment doesn't. There was a Mr. West Gilbert wrote the Death on the Gallows, which is 400 and something people that were hanged in Texas from way back when to Nathan Lee. And they all go through pretty much the same thing. They get up there, they say, they might say goodbye to everybody. They'll say how the jailers treated them kindly. They'll say how they're going to heaven. They're going to see everybody in heaven. And of course, now you had the few in there that didn't.
Mm-hmm.
One guy stabbed the sheriff, and then his brother hung him. The sheriff's brother hung him.
Yeah.
And then you had others that got up there and just told everybody what they thought of them.
Uh-huh.
And of course they were all innocent too. So you just had a running. If they didn't do that, it was why didn't they do that?
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with these people? Because they say that this is your one chance to have a crowd of people listening to you.
Mm-hmm. But Roy didn't have much to say.
No. Before they hung him, they had to go through the regular procedures. They first fed him steak and eggs and fried potatoes, but they didn't list everything that he ate. And then then he had this religious advisor. His name was O.R. Smith Hatfield. He was a Church of the Nazarene preacher here in town, and he was with him till about 9 o'clock or so, for sure. And then from 9 to 10, the Sheriff Stegall and Farmer went in and talked to him because they were really wanting him to tell them who done it with him, and if he had any help, anything like that. And he wouldn't talk. Then then there was two people contacted here in Waco, and they were contacted and asked to go and talk to Roy and find out if he would tell his story and why he done it. And now he supposedly told everything he did wrong to the preacher. And according to Stegall and Farmer, he admitted that he was guilty of all the crimes that he was convicted of. Well,
they said supposedly that's what he told the preacher, is that he did everything, or that he had confessed to them.
Yeah. Well, don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's just ask Roy.
Yeah.
He might tell us the truth. He might not. But anyway, they talked to these two individuals, representatives of the governor, and he confessed to the crime, but he wouldn't give up the name of the person. So it still tells you, who was he trying to protect, or if he even knew who to protect. He could just pick somebody he didn't like and give him the name up.
Yeah.
But he said that he wasn't going to be a coward or a liar or a snitch. So they went ahead and walked. 11 or just before 11 o'clock comes, he was downstairs. He goes up and they open the cell door, puts his arm out. They wrap it up, turns around, puts his hands behind his back. They wrap him up there. Then he starts to go up the inside stairs, and Stiegel goes to help him, make sure he doesn't fall, because it's hard to walk upstairs on the last day of your life like that. Mm-hmm. And Roy said, "Hey, I don't need help. I'm going to be steady." And Stiegel said, "Well, I'm not going to need any help either. I'm fixed when I pop that trap." And they go on upstairs, and he's joking with the jailers as he goes, with different officers there, while they're unlocking the door, and they open the door. Now there's a picture of about 13 or 14 people on the thing, and some more people coming out of the door. And I believe it's a Gildersleeve picture, and it was taken from either upstairs or of the courthouse or on the roof, one or the other. Yeah. You can just barely see a little piece of masonry off to the side. And then a guy named McCall apparently was on the scaffolding itself, because they show a picture of Roy standing there. He's got a noose around his neck, and Stiegel's got the black mask up underneath his arm. Interesting thing about the black mask, the man that the tailor that did sewed it up and everything, that was his third one to do, and his name was Mike Adams, and lived not far, about a block and a half from where I live, over by St. Albans. And his son-in-law was Leon Jaworski.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
So there's all kinds of combinations and people knowing each other and this and that, but I don't know what happened to the mask. It was just a black bag with a tie string. But anyway, when everybody was expecting him to come out and say something, all he did was say goodbye to everybody, first off. And then after they got the mask on him, and they tied him around the ankles, around the lower thighs, and I think around the body. I'm not sure. So he was real trussed up and everything. And he was heard to mutter, "Take me home," through the mask. And he might have said, he might have been muttering a prayer when they actually kicked the thing off. But Stiegel popped that thing at 11:02, and the doctors down were stationed below him, and they said his heart stopped and then beat a little, and then came back and beat a little bit, and then stopped again for good. And then after about 25, 26 minutes, they declared him dead. And then what they did, they had a hearse. Well, they already had the coffin there. They had been storing it in the back of the jail. They put him in the coffin, put him in the hearse. The 4 or 5 officers went directly to Restland Cemetery, and one newspaper come up and said that, and I was talking with my late girlfriend, and we were saying, I wonder what happened to that gold tooth. Who got that gold tooth? And I'm reading the newspaper account, and it says burial was taken care of by a dentist. And I go, oh, it's gone.
Dentist got it.
Some dentist got it. Death certificate gives the name W.L. Dennis.
Oh.
who was a well-known undertaker here in town.
Okay.
Mr. Dennis, the year after that, he went into business with Boykins and was with him until he ended up committing suicide in 1941, hanging himself out there in Cameron Park. So a lot of little tentacles out there.
Yeah.
Combinations, everything. But the actual location of the grave is, if you go out South 9th Street, used to be there was a bridge going over the ditch there at Garden Drive at Restland. Have sign over it and everything. Well, now the sign's gone and it's all growed up, and the bridge was taken out a long time ago. There's a pole still there. I don't know if there's 2 poles or not. It's solid briars and everything there. And that used to be the way to get in there. And then you had the white section along the Garden Drive. Then you had the Mexican section was next, and then the black section. And originally you had 2 5-acre tracts there. And then what they did, they put that ditch through and it cut across one of the 5-acre tracts. And all that land was sold to Oakwood Cemetery. And then what land Oakwood had on the north side of the westernmost 5-acre tract went to the Restland Cemetery. That's why it's so different out there. Now, I've seen a 1934 map that's in the archives that shows where all the graves were at that time, but with no possibility of telling who's who.
Yeah.
Later on, there was other people buried out there as well, and here and there in the black and Mexican and white section. But if you go, you can't get there you can go Garden Drive up to 12th Street, and then there's a subdivision across from Wolf's right there. Go in that subdivision until you get to 9th Street, and that's the cemetery. Well, on the extreme south end of 9th Street where it stops, you got a gate there where you can get in. And then there's a walking gate up a little further to the up north 9th Street a little bit. But anyway, right there where that gate is, there's a ditch that runs off. And on the left-hand side of that ditch are all these modern graves with all the little markers and everything. And on the right-hand side of the ditch, the south side, is the end of the black section.
I see.
So 1921 or so is when they started burying people. Roy was buried in 1923. There's between the start of that and this one tree, that the first tree you get to in the black section, there's about 42 spaces altogether. So the question is, if there was 42 people ahead of Roy, he got to a little bit of shade, or were they going this way back and forth, or were they going up and down?
We don't know.
Nobody knows.
Yeah. Well.
And I'd like to think he's under the shade tree there. My ex-girlfriend, she said, this is, he's got to be right here. I said, okay. She wanted to do a tour and everything. And we call it, I'm going to put a plaque on this thing, call it Roy Mitchell Tree. And I said, well, get permission first.
Well, I'm imagining at the time they're concerned about his body being taken.
Right.
Yeah.
But the strange thing was when they got out there, before they buried him, 2 white women showed up and wanted to see him. And they went ahead and opened up the coffin, showed it to him, and then they just turned and left, and no word, didn't say nothing. Don't know who they are. If anybody knows, grandmother or for a reason who this was, let us know.
Oh, that's interesting.
There's lots of unanswered questions. Did he do it all? Did he why did he do it? You know, all that kind of stuff. Things you'll never know.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I wrote the book was because so many people had just messed up accounts.
Mm-hmm.
They would start out good. There was one guy that was a witness to I got several witnesses here. There was one guy that was a witness named Rotan Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
He's Joe Johnson's father. And there was a lawyer who became a judge. His name was Rusty Duncan III up in Dallas. He died about 4 or 5 years after becoming a judge in a car wreck.
Mm.
And either he wrote the story up for this lawyer magazine or he had a law clerk do it, because it was just terrible. And on his notes, he puts Rotan Johnson as his informant. Well, I put down my book. I said, if Rusty Duncan says that Rotan Johnson did it, then I don't know that Rotan Johnson even exists.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a bad account.
Oh, really? Yeah.
You know, you start out, the first killing might be right, and then after that, it just all over the place.
Yeah.
And then I ran into Joe Johnson at the HEB, and we got started talking. And I said, want to know how he was related to Rotan, and he said, well, my middle name's Rotan, and that was my dad. Said his dad was in the judge's chambers watching the execution.
I see.
And so I had to adjust that on my book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Say he does exist.
Yeah.
And he was there.
Mm.
We had there was let's see. Let me get the names of the people, because there was quite a few that I ran into through here that
These are witnesses to the execution? Okay.
Let's see. Well, besides all the cops and everything,
Mm-hmm.
the physicians, there's district clerk was there. And then the William Bartlett was there. He was 18 and a future lawyer, and he got to see who actually cut the rope.
Mm.
And he said it was a messenger boy for the Western Union, but 50 years later, he still wouldn't give the kid's name up. Mm. He said it wouldn't be right if he did that. Mm. So he was a witness to everything. Then there was a guy named Bill Gensler that was 10 years old at the time, and his uncle had taken him there. And the uncle had, both of them caught hell when they got home, when the mother found out.
Wow.
And he wasn't the only kid there. I was at the library, and I was talking to this woman, and she said that her grandfather's name was William David Neal, and his son's name was William Alfred Neal, and he was 5 years old. He got to watch the whole thing from his dad's shoulders. Mm. And she was just appalled at the idea that her 5-year-old father was there at the execution. And I said, well, you know, not a lot of things happening and everything, you know. Something like that, you can say you were there. And there was Mr. Brumfield, who was a neighbor of the Barkers, was out there. And then he was interviewed in 1975, and he was a firm believer in capital punishment and gun control. And Arthur Crow of the Crow Laundry was there. William Foster was he wrote the article about it in the Observations.
Yeah.
And had a picture of St. Johnson too, the one that who pulled his tooth out.
Yeah.
And he was there. And then there's this one woman that I knew right after I came to Waco, almost 50 years ago. And Mrs. O.C. Herdman, Mary Herdman, and she was telling me the story. Her father was had died just a year or two before this happened. And she was living with her widowed mother, Eloise Quarles. And they had come downtown that day to do some shopping. And they run into all this big old crowd. So they said, "What's going on?" And somebody said, "Oh, they're hanging Roy Mitchell today." And she snatched up Mary and they took off and said, "You can't see this." And they started to go home. And I said, Mary had enough news. Her father was James Hayes Quarles, and he was a well-known newspaper reporter. And I said she had enough news ink in her blood to put up a fight, but she still didn't get to see it.
Yeah. Well.
And then there was, I say that what would a hanging be without a boy meets girl story? And I said, well, this is not that story. This one guy was telling me that his mother was Roxy Wanette Thrower, and she had gone as a 17-year-old to the execution, and James David Moody was 24-year-old. He was there, but didn't meet. But years later, after Mr. Moody's first wife died, he married Roxy, and they started talking, and one thing led to the other, and about past experiences. And I said, "Oh yeah, I was at Roy's hanging." And, "Yeah, I was too." And
wow,
it's one of the things they had in common besides their son that told me the story, Hayden.
One of the things that in the state that makes this execution is it's one of the last.
Second to the last.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, it's the last public one.
Yeah,
last. Keep saying it that way.
Last public. I mean, it's kind of a left-handed brag, but I mean that. I mean, because the law changes. The law changes with regard to execuation, right?
No, they botched it as far as keeping it from being public and a real one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happened was right off the bat, after he was executed, they said that somebody come up in the newspaper and said, "This is probably going to be the last one." Well, that day is the day they had Nathan Lee's trial in Brazoria County. So they didn't have that information yet that there was one other person that got the death penalty coming up. And he was, the changeover was supposed to be August the 14th. Well, he was grandfathered in because he was on the real, and then he was hung on the last day of August or whatever. But the problem is the law said they hang them between hours of such and such and such and such on the day that he's supposed to die. And then you're supposed to, the difference between a public hanging is what you see in all the cowboy movies. Everybody goes out there, they've got the guy in the wagon, they kick him off the horse out from underneath him, and that's public. Private is when you invite certain dignitaries, victims, that kind of thing. They're allowed to see it, but the public itself is not allowed to see it.
Well, that's how they do executions. I mean, that's how they do executions now, right? Yeah.
It's not a public execution.
Yeah.
It's Well, anyway, when the tarp fell, now everybody could see it, and instead of since they couldn't do it in the clock tower, they could just as easily done it anywhere else, but they had to do it on the grounds of the jail. You couldn't go out there in a big old field or something like that. It had to be. It could be it could be in the yard, could be on the roof, for all that matter. Just depends on how you want to do it. So when tarp fell, it became public.
Yeah.
And he could have just said, hold on, lift the tarp back up and threaten to shoot anybody that knocks it down again or cuts it again. But
so where was the tarp? The tarp was around the
front. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not sure how far it extended, which way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how they attached the ropes.
But the idea was to kind of block a public view of it. Okay.
Right. It was, the witnesses down below could see it. Now, you don't let the prisoners see it. Move them to the other side of the jail, but they get to hear that slap of the rope and the thud of the trap dropping.
Yeah. So the Lee execution is a private execution that's held inside the jail.
Right.
Yeah.
And the last one, which made me want to know, well, who's the first execution? Well, first off, they were going to have the warden do the executions from then on out. Before that, it was always the sheriff of the county that did it. Well, the warden says, "Nah, I retire. You don't pay me enough." So he retires, and then they had trouble with setting up the device. Now the assistant warden, he was saying, "I'll do it. I don't care. I'll do it." And they said, "Nope, it's got to be the warden." And he's like Barney Fife, "I'll do it, Andy." No, you can't do it. It's got to be the warden do it. And they ended up running. They were supposed to do the first one like the 1st of September or so. It wasn't until like February the 12th or 10th or something like that they hired an ex-sheriff to become a warden, and they run 5 people through there in 2 hours time one night. Which one guy, the first one that they start to go through, they had taken him and he had a call into the governor. So they say, "Okay, well, we'll take you out of line." They put him on the end, and then they did the other 4, and then, "Well, the governor ain't called yet. Have a seat."
Well, it's amazing the research you've done here, John.
Yeah, the only other thing I did, I got an epilogue, which I tell what happens to all the different people involved with it and everything. And then family members, how they turned out. Surprisingly, a lot of them were in the service.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a lot of them served in either Vietnam or Korean War too. Some Navy, Air Force, Army, but their lives weren't as rosy as it could have been. Some of them, the only granddaughter, she ended up having the best life, and she ended up being an educator up in New Jersey. And his son, he went a career military, but he only lived until 1956. Somehow, I can't find out how he died, but he died in Fort Dix after his 4th enlistment.
Oh, wow.
He was a World War II vet. And then the Minnie side of the family, she was interviewed at one time during the last 30 days, and she come out and said Roy didn't tell her his business.
Okay.
She ended up basically perjuring herself on like 4 different trials, and but she ended up remarrying in 1926, and that man died within 6 months. And then in the 1930s, she married Leroy Majors, and he 1940 he's in Dallas, working. And then she moves up there with him and dies in 1941. She had a brain embolism or something like that, some fancy name for a stroke. And her granddaughter said how badly she was treated all those years, that people would see her on the street and spit at her and slap her face and treat her poorly.
Wow. Well, I sure appreciate you coming and sharing this. It's been a journey. But I mean, it's reflective of the depth of research you did.
Well, I could make up some stuff. We do.
No. Let's don't do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
Ride hard and I'll make it by dawn.
Thanks for listening to the Waco History Podcast. Like what you heard? Subscribe, rate, and review our show on iTunes so we can reach more listeners. You can find show notes and info on every episode at wacohistorypodcast.com. and more info on Waco's past at wacohistory.org. Our theme music, used with permission, is Cross the Brazos at Waco, performed by the late Billy Walker. For more info on Billy's music, go to billywalker.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. This has been a Rogue Media Network production.